What's up, good people? My name's AJ, and I wanted to make a quick video here today about the adjusted study schedules for a lot of people that are taking the CFA exams in the year 2020. So if you haven't seen any of my other stuff, I passed the 3 levels of the exam all in the first try, and I'm going to apply some of my principles when I passed the exams, just finishing level 3 last year. So I really lucked out given the global pandemic that we're in the midst of and the rescheduling of not just the CFA exams, but a lot of other exams. But I still think that some of those principles that I used while studying can kind of be applied to fit the current state of this adjusted testing schedule that a lot of candidates are going to be subject to this year. First of all, I should say that I don't want to discount the added stress or difficulty of the exams this year. I think it will pose more of a challenge to people who were already had just started or in the middle of their studies by the time that the June 2020 exams got delayed. So I'm definitely glad that I got my exams done in 2019 before again this pandemic broke out and everything had to be changed. But that being said, don't feel too sorry for yourselves if you're someone who is hoping to pass the CFA exam any of the levels this year. You definitely still can do so, and I think I can share with you some ideas here on how to make that happen. This should apply to you whether you had not started studying yet and still needed to pick a start date, which I think the exams were pushed back out in about March of 2020. So if you were waiting that long, then this shouldn't be too much of an issue to you anyway, unless you have some other life events going on towards the end of the year, because you weren't allocating that long of a period of time to study in the first place. So it should apply to you. It should apply to the person who was just getting started in their studies and has put them off for now until later on in the year. And it should also apply to the person who might have done it like myself, who started in October and November and was already potentially 6 months into their studies when the exams got pushed out. And that person may be the ones who are feeling the most discouraged right now. Whatever your situation is, I think there are good steps you can take to maximize your chances of still passing this year in December. The most important factor that I've talked about for passing these exams in all my other videos is something that is not going to be changing by the exam getting delayed by 6 months, and that's the total amount of hours that you put in. Maybe more importantly is the quality of those hours, but if you put in enough hours, your more good hours are going to come with those. So my point is that if you're tracking your hours, if your goal is 300, 400, 500, 600 hours, whatever that might be, to pass these exams, just re-budget when those hours are going to have to take place. So if you're planning on January 1st to June 15th, or whenever the exam would have been in 2020, I'm not exactly sure, and you did some math and determined how many hours you were going to study on weekends and weekdays, and they added up to say 400 hours, it's not this part of the conversation is not all that difficult for you. You should still hit 400 hours, and the fact that the exams are later in the year doesn't change that. You're still going to have the same amount of days to plan, and you can put in the same amount of hours each day. Again, assuming you don't have some major life event that's happening for you in the second half of the year that otherwise wouldn't have been a factor in the first half of the year. But point is, do the hours. You can still do the hours. It shouldn't be much of an issue for you. I just want to hit home on this, and I mentioned this one first because hours are still most important. So please don't think that this has shifted the game, or don't let this make you feel like you're in the middle of some kind of alternate scenario now where maybe the minimum passing score is going to be lower, or more people are going to be scoring lower. Just focus on your game, and that should be hitting that goal on number of hours that you have. If you don't have a goal of set number of hours that you're studying for, that might be fine for you. I think it personally worked for me. You can listen to me talk about that in other videos. But anyway, hit your hours. And the second most important factor with, I think, almost any candidate CFA study process or preparation process is the final review that you do. So this section or this point that I'm making is why I think even for the person who might have started studying in November of 2019, and then that got cut short 4 or 5 months later in March when they announced that the exams are going to be delayed. Even for that person who, again, might feel most discouraged by this, don't be, because the review that you do in the last 30 days, in my opinion, about the last 4 weeks or 30 days before the exam, are probably the most important 30 days of the whole study process. So if you're worried about there being a big gap in your studies, and let's say you studied December, January, February, and then stopped, and you got through the first 3 books, so ethics, quant, and econ, I think. Say if you're studying for level 1 or level 2, those might be the first 3 books if you're going in order. And now you're going to have this 5-month gap, and you say, okay, I'm going to pick back up in August, or whatever would correspond to 4 remaining months before the exam. Probably, yeah, it would be middle of August or so. You having that large gap in your study schedule is almost equal to the amount of time, the amount of additional time that you would have spent studying relative to someone who spent a very short amount of time studying. Now, here's what I mean by that. Some people study for a very short amount of time, but do a ton of studying in an extreme example. Some people will study just for 30 days and 10 hours a day or something like that. They're off work. So that person did all their studying in 1 month. If you were someone who did all your studying over 6 months, well, you did 5 more months of studying than the person who did it in 1 month. So you had 5 more months of time to forget those things you studied in the first few weeks, say. The reason that's okay for you is because of the importance of the review period. Now, if you didn't review the things from 6 months ago and you went in and took the exam, you're not going to get it right. You're not going to remember things from 6 months ago as well as you'll remember things from 6 weeks ago. But the reason it works is because you do a comprehensive review in the last, again, in my opinion, is 4 weeks, and refresh on those things you had learned, kind of relearn them, repractice them, and get your skills sharp before the exam. That 6-month strategy works. So this 12-month strategy that you might be in now can also work for the same reason that the 6-month strategy works, and that is you're going to go back and review those things. Now, I know it's going to be longer ago that you would have studied those topics. So depending on how your brain works, it's going to be relatively more difficult to recall and relearn and then reapply that information, but you still can do it. So maybe allot another 2 or 3 weeks for this review process added to what you were already planning on doing. So again, instead of 4, I'd do 6 weeks or something, and review that material a little more in depth. And you should be able to pick back up right where you left off. Again, some people study for 6 months longer than other people, and they had 6 more months to forget information. So this is a similar example, just spent over a longer period of time, if you see where my logic is at with this. So since the review process is so important to what I see as the things necessary to pass the CFA exams, it is now even more important, since we are further delayed before being able to take the exams until December of 2020. So make sure your review process is very efficient and very effective. And I have other videos talking about how I did my review in the last 4 weeks before the exam. But again, even if you're someone who started early on and now you're going to have to take this 4 or 5 month break, that's okay if you review well. And then just finally, I think it's personally a little easier time of year to be studying, fall and winter time. You have really ugly weather, frankly, and depending on where you live in the world, for me, I'm in the Midwest of the United States. When I typically started studying October, November, and then through January, February, March, it was really ugly out. And I like to snowboard, so there's one activity you can do outside, but other than that, there's nothing outside to be doing. But most people, I think, just really get into heavy studying in March, April, May, when spring is out, or the weather gets nicer and people start wanting to spend time outside a lot more, go to the beaches. So since the majority of that period of time is now going to be October, November, it's not that big of a deal. You kind of get more freedom during the summer months in 2020, and then you're really going to have to dig in during some of those uglier months when there's less going on anyway. So you might have to miss out on Thanksgiving dinner or whatever, take a quick break over Thanksgiving. But anyway, in the grand scheme of things, I think that December schedule could make a little more sense for certain activities that people want to spend their time on. So it could work out for the better. Again, my heart goes out to you. It would be extremely difficult. I would be personally really discouraged if my exams had gotten pushed out from the very strict schedule that I held myself to during my exam preparation process. So if you're in that boat, I definitely wouldn't be in your shoes. But again, you can overcome it, and if you put in the work, I know you will. So thanks for watching.